Yo, what is up, guys? Back with another video. In this one, I'm going to be talking about Week 8 buy and sell targets. So these are guys that you want to try to sell while their value is high, or you want to try to buy dudes whose values are low following the Week 7 game. So it's kind of a thin week when it comes to wide receivers. I'm going to cover wide receivers in this video. It's a thin week because there aren't too many sell candidates this week, in my opinion, at the wide receiver position. And we'll get into that a little later. I'm just going to start by going through this list straight away from the beginning. And it starts kind of similar to how last week's buy and sell targets went. And that starts with T. Higgins. So T. Higgins hasn't had a great game since week 4. He had that injury where he kind of was where he didn't play in week 5, and then he was clearly hobbled in week 6. He had his first full allotment of snaps kind of last week in week 7, and he didn't get into the end zone. He was maybe a foot away from getting into the end zone. He caught a slant pass at the 12-yard line, and almost ran it all the way in, and reached for the end zone and just came up short. I think the touchdown eventually went to a Joe Burrow rushing TD or something on that play. So T. Higgins' day could have been much, much bigger. He could have had, 17, 18 fantasy points if he would have got that touchdown. So he is still a buy low candidate, in my opinion. I think it's probably one of the better offenses in the league right now, the Bengals. You get the Chiefs, you get the Bills, and you get the Bengals. Those are the top 3 offenses. So you definitely want to get pieces on any of those 3 teams. And this T. Higgins is one of those guys who I think could finish in the top 10, top 12 from here on out. So that's why he's a buy low candidate. So number 2 guy on my list is Chris Godwin yet again. So the Buccaneers offense has looked decrepit. It's looked borderline horrible. Tom Brady looks, dare I say, he doesn't look washed. He's still making decent throws. He's underthrowing some of his receivers at the moment, which makes me think maybe he's got some type of, I know he had a finger injury or a hand injury or something like that. I don't know what's going on with the Bucs. They need to turn it around. They didn't really have a very constructive or long offseason with Brady because of his offseason issues that he was going through. I know he was not at camp for a solid week. So is that why they're struggling? I don't know. It's really tough to say why the Bucs are struggling. I think they rely more on the pass. Chris Godwin still had 13 targets. Unfortunately, he's kind of playing a short yardage slot type role, so he's not getting a lot of downfield stuff. That could be because of his injury. He's coming off of an ACL injury, so it makes sense why he's not getting the vertical beat my man type vertical routes. So let's hope that changes. Hope his average depth of target changes, and that's kind of why you're buying Chris Godwin on the hope that he continues his large target share, and he maybe capitalizes on some more yards per catch as the season commences and as they kind of right the ship. I think they have the talent. Tom Brady, as much as he looks pretty bad right now, he's still Tom Brady. He could still turn it around, and I think that's kind of par for the course for the Bucs. I know the last couple of seasons they've kind of had slow starts and then kind of rev it up as they approach the offseason or the postseason rather. So I would assume that they turn things around. You can still get him at a pretty good value, and that's why he's my number 2 guy on this week. And the next guy is Rashod Bateman. So Rashod Bateman, similar type situation. He was injured for a lot of the season. He got injured in week 4 and then hasn't really. He came back last week. He only played 56% of the snaps, and he was decently productive, actually. 4 catches for 42 yards coming off of an injury. You can't really be that upset with that. I expect his workload to increase. I expect him to become a bigger part of the offense as they continue. And it's very clear that the Ravens actually need Rashod Bateman. They need him to produce. They need him to be what he was kind of pre-injury. I know he was a little bit touchdown dependent. He was a low target share, low reception type guy, but he was getting into the end zone on those long bombs. And that's somebody that I'd like to buy. It's somebody that I would like to put at the end, the end of my bench, or put at my second flex spot or one of my flex spots. And I'd be comfortable doing that with a guy like Rashod Bateman moving forward, especially considering that the Bengals have a pretty nice playoff schedule. So they're playing against Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Atlanta, and Pittsburgh again, weeks 14 through 17, which is something that I like. Pittsburgh is a very easy matchup for most people right now because of all the injuries that their defense has faced, and that makes for the it makes for a good matchup that I like. Atlanta is definitely a good matchup. Cleveland also a decent matchup for wide receivers, so that's somebody that I like to buy. The last guy on my list of buys is WanDale Robinson. So in week 6, WanDale Robinson looked potentially league winning. He looked league winning. He only played 23% of the snaps, but he had 3 for 37 and a really nice touchdown in week 6. And he unfortunately followed that up in week 7 with not so much usage. In the first half, he was dynamite. He had like 6 for 50 in the first half and then did nothing else in week 7. So you expect his workload to increase and for him to continue to be a big part of this offense for the Giants. They are one of the better teams in the NFL this season. I don't know how. They're like 7-1 and they're winning, and Daniel Jones actually looks pretty decent. Saquon Barkley is Saquon Barkley. He's a monster. So go and get WanDale Robinson. He could still be that league winning type guy. Their schedule is actually pretty decent going down the stretch, right? So that Philadelphia matchup in week 14 is something that is a little bit worrying. But thankfully, the playoffs are in week 14, right? So fantasy playoffs start week 15. You get Washington, Minnesota, Indy. Those are 3 very solid matchups. Matchups that, and especially the Indy matchup, is a matchup that I can imagine a guy like WanDale, a short yardage slot type receiver, to be very effective in. So those are my 4 guys that I'd still go out to buy in going into week 8. So we're going to quickly go into some of my sell candidates. And as I mentioned, guys, this is a pretty thin list of sells. And the first one is Terry McLaurin. So I am a massive Terry McLaurin hater. Not so much the talent. Actually, I don't think he's that great. Like, he's never really done much in his career. He's massively overpaid for someone who really hasn't produced much in his entire career. He's shown flashes, obviously, and he has had a bad quarterback. So I'm not going to knock him too much, but for the type of money that he got, he has way too many games where he doesn't really do anything. I mean, 3-2 fantasy points last season. He had some pop-off games with 22 fantasy points, but then you sprinkle in those 6, 4, 5 fantasy points, 7, 3, 0, 6, 5. I don't understand it. I don't understand the hype around Terry McLaurin. Last week, he popped off with Heineke at the helm, and he went 5 for 73 and a touchdown. He was pretty much doing nothing the entire game until he got that touchdown at the very end of the game. So I would still try to sell him. He still has name value. He still has a massive amount of money put into this player. So I imagine he's not going to lose his job or anything. So you could still sell him on that prospect. So I try to sell Terry McLaurin as, if I can, flip him for maybe another wide receiver, a wide receiver 2, flip him for a guy like Godwin if you could. I will take that any day of the week. I would even potentially do it for Bateman. That's a little bit of a toss-up, but I think they're kind of a wash. They can end up with similar amount of points the rest of the season. But yeah, try to flip him for Godwin. If you can package him for someone like T. Higgins, that's what I do. But at the end of the day, you want to package these guys, try to trade with teams that are at the bottom of the league standings. Always take advantage of teams that are struggling, that are on the cusp, that are trying to push for the playoffs. Giving them a guy like Terry McLaurin could be a lucrative or compelling prospect, as Terry McLaurin could get those pop-off weeks that are enough to help these guys win weeks. So that's who I try to sell. Next sell candidate, this one, I mean, again, kind of fishing at the bottom of the barrel, or scraping at the bottom of the barrel, as they say, and it's Tyler Boyd. He's actually been pretty involved for the Bengals. I mean, he's the wide receiver 3 for the Bengals, and he just went 8 for 155 and a touchdown on a completely broken play that he got like an 80-yard touchdown, like the first play of the game for the Bengals. So sell on that if you can. I doubt anyone's going to really bite on someone like Tyler Boyd, but you could potentially flip him in a package for a guy like Bateman, potentially even Chris Godwin. That'll be tough, but yeah, those are my 2 sell candidates. He just had a pop-off game. It's going to be too difficult to know when he's going to do that. Obviously, if T. Higgins or Chase were to go down, Boyd would instantly become a high upside wide receiver 3-2 borderline. So there's always that as well. And he is attached to a very strong offense. So you can kind of sell that narrative to the guy who you try to be selling him to. So, yep, those are my buys and sells guys at the wide receiver position for week 8. Let me know if I missed someone. But essentially my thinking behind most of these buys and sells is sell guys who just had great weeks. I mean, this is fucking like fantasy 101. Who the fuck even needs to know this? Sell guys who just had big weeks. Buy guys who have been bad / injured, who are on good offenses, who you expect those offenses to either turn it around or have an easy schedule going forward. So yeah, pretty intuitive, pretty easy to understand. But yeah, those are my buys and sells, guys. Hope this video helps, or hope you enjoyed it. If you have some recommendations, or if you had some other ideas of other buy and sell candidates, let me know in the comments. If you need help with sits and starts, also hit them on the comments. I'll try to respond as soon as I can. So catch you guys in the next one. Peace.